Welcome to this meeting of South Oxfordshire District Council's Planning Committee. I am not Councillor David Brunton, but I'm speaking for him for this introduction, and he will be chairing this meeting. May I remind everyone that this is a meeting in public, not a public meeting. Only members of the public who are registered to speak are allowed to do so, and he will call on them to speak during the appropriate agenda item. This meeting is being held at our offices in Abbey House, Abingdon. Committee members are here in person, but officers and speakers are able to join remotely. The meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Council's YouTube channel for public viewing. This system allows councillors who are unable to attend in person to contribute to the meeting, but only councillors who are present in the room are allowed to vote. Procedural matters. For speakers and members of the public who have joined remotely, please ensure that your microphone is muted and that your camera is off for the duration of the meeting until you're called to speak. The Planning Committee is a decision-making committee of the Council, and it is important that a set procedure is followed. All committee members have received a full report on each planning application, either on paper or electronically, and it should be noted that committee members and officers may be using electronic devices for reference throughout the meeting. For each application, we will first hear from the planning officer, followed by the parish or town council, and then objectors, supporters, and local members. Each group will have 5 minutes to speak to the committee, after which members may ask questions of the speaker. The committee may then ask questions for clarification of the planning officer. The committee will then debate and vote on the application. Councillors wishing to ask a question or participate in the debate are asked to indicate this by alerting myself or officers by raising a hand. Voting will be by a show of hands. Members, please raise your hands clearly and keep it raised to allow a count to take place. If it is unclear how members are voting, through a show of hands, I will ask the clerk to undertake a roll call of those present and how they are voting. There are a few housekeeping announcements. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate the building by the nearest exit, which is in the corridor immediately to the right of the meeting room, and go to Assembly Point 9 in the outside area beyond the fire exit. The Democratic Services Officer present will assist you. Can everyone please ensure that their mobile phone is switched to silent or switched off during the meeting, including me. Members of the public who wish to leave the meeting after their application has been heard are welcome to do so via the front door in reception. When the meeting has finished, I will ask for confirmation that the live stream has ended. At that point, please leave the meeting and make your way out of the building, remembering to sign out as you leave.
Thank you, James. I appreciate my voice is not there, but I'll try to get through. If you can't hear me, just say you can't hear me.
I can hear you, Chair.
You can hear me.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. So, sorry, where are we? Agenda. Second item on the agenda is apologies for absence.
We've received no apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Minutes for previous meeting. Adopt and sign as a great record. Planning Committee minutes. The meeting on the 27th of May. 20th of May. Are we happy with those?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Declaration of interest. Receive any declarations of disposable pecuniary interest or other interest. I see you. Oh yes, Councillor.
I don't know if it's an interest or not. All I would declare is that I know the applicant for the last planning application, Andrew Stewart Holden, socially. I don't know if that's any implications on anything.
It's up to you, Councillor.
I'm happy to participate in the
Version business.
Yes.
Sorry, business.
Well, I don't know if this is the right place to bring it up, but I did send you an email this afternoon requesting that item number 8 is declared site visit.
Sorry, okay.
So yeah, I sent an email this afternoon.
Yeah,
and it was asking if we could defer item number 8. There was special for something that,
for
sorry,
the site visit.
um,
Are you putting that forward as a proposal? Proposing?
I am actually, yes.
Yeah,
And
okay.
I've already,
So I have a proposal for a site visit. I don't need to ask reasons. I just need a second there. I think Councillor Keith's right, second it. Yeah, I'll just go straight to your thoughts.
Well, can I just ask the reason?
It doesn't have to declare that. No. Unless you want to. Let's see why.
okay, but the area is quite a sensitive area in that it's right next to a national landscapes area. It sits out, although it's within the village, it's within the parish. It's not within the village. So there's some. I think it would be worthy of a site visit for that reason. Essentially, I just want to stop there. Actually, okay.
Any further comment? Or we'll go to the votes. All those in favour of the site visit? Sure. That's 8 against. Not against, abstention. Therefore, item 8 on the agenda is deferred for a site visit. We're only waiting for item 8. It won't be met tonight. Right, where are we? Okay, we'll go on to the planning applications. And we go to item 7, which is a plot of Sandpath on Beckley. The planning officer told the house, and we'll hear from Paul now.
Thank you, Chair. The application is before members this evening. The views of the parish council conflict with your officer's recommendation that planning permission should be granted. The application was considered at the last meeting and deferred for a site visit that took place on Monday of this week. The application seeks to vary and expand planning permission for the erection of a simple dwelling on an infill plot within the settlement of Beckley. The approved scheme permitted a modern single-storey dwelling. Proposed changes to the scheme will create a 2-storey dwelling and detached ancillary building. The modern design of the building does not, in your officer's view, detract from the character of the area. The closest property to the east is also of a modern style, and various dwellings along Woodbury Road extending eastward are of differing and contemporary appearance. This property will sit comfortably in that context. The site is outside, but adjacent to the conservation area. Your specialist heritage officer has considered the impact to the setting of the conservation area and concluded the significance of the conservation area as a designated heritage asset will not be negatively impacted. The change in levels between the application site and a neighbour to the east is such that the increase in height and provision of first floor windows does not create a materially higher impact. First floor windows and a balcony on the northern end of the building look onto a communal parking area for the properties to the north. It does not result in a materially harmful level of overlooking of the rear garden of the nearest property at number 5 Raymond Way. The increase in height will have a greater impact on the green belt. However, the dwelling would remain within the tolerance allowed by infill development as a type of development which is not considered to be inappropriate. Overall, the changes to the permitted scheme are considered acceptable, and your officers recommend the application for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, we have 3 speakers. First one is Jess Walsh, the Beckley Parish Council. We have 5 minutes.
So Jeanette Camps-Walsh, I've met most of you before. First slide, please. So you've had your site visit. I don't know whether you managed to go to the top of the hill, Sandpath, and look down across Beckley and see the wonderful views that this building will affect. The planning officer admitted in the last meeting that it would have an impact, in fact, negatively as far as I'm concerned, on the green belt, and it will compromise its openness. The problem with this development is that it's elevated well above the landscape and the surrounding houses, and the trees that are in the plans don't exist, as you probably saw. Next slide, please. So this is the conservation area, and this is approximately where the plot is that you've seen. So the conservation area goes right up to its doorstep. It overlooks the bungalows here and into their back garden. It also overlooks some of the backs of the houses in the high street and obviously the neighbours Tanglewood. Next slide, please. So our main concern is the overbearing and the look of the thing. The previous planning application, the parish council supported because it was one story. It was in the contours of the landscape, and it didn't show above the landscape looking into Beckley. Just recently, a precedent has been set by another development which was rejected on the grounds of DES 6 non-compliance, which I'll talk about in a moment. So you can see that that is a picture of the bungalow. It's right next to it. This is a picture of the plot itself. I mean, do you think building has been started on that? Because I don't. And this is a picture of the fields and the green belt, which it will be overbearing and overlooking. So you can see this has got a balcony here, which overlooks this, and it's upside down, so it's one story up. Next slide, please. So recently, a planning application has been rejected in Beckley, which is nowhere near as serious as this, which overlooks its neighbours. And you could almost use the same wording. The planning permission was refused because the balcony was constructed on the side elevation, which directly overlooked the neighbour's private immunity. In this case, it was a garden, but in this case, it's actually the whole bungalow and the row of bungalows. So on this grounds alone, I would ask you to reject this. Next slide, please. So we still maintain that this should be a new application, which is so different from the application that was granted some time ago. And if you look at the conditions, you'll see the reason why the conditions were put is because the concern about the openness, safeguarding your amenities of neighbours, and the character of the area. We don't agree with the planning officer that this development is anything like anything else in Beckley. Also, it is not compliant with the neighbourhood plan, so the planning officer, in our view, should not be recommending that it be granted. And the original planning permission was expired in May 23. Next slide, please. Next slide, thank you. So the problem here is the height. If you look at this, you'll see it sticks way above the surrounding, these are the bungalows, I presume. It sticks way above the surrounding countryside and will be an eyesore. And this is the this is the plot. So it's got a harmful impact on the surrounding countryside and houses. And the main problem is the increase in height from 3.2 metres to 7.6 metres. Next slide, please. So it
Last 30 seconds.
doesn't comply with the neighbourhood plan on 7 counts, which I've outlined here. Next slide, please. And these two, flooding and energy efficiency. Next slide, please. So I ask you to oppose this because it doesn't comply with many of the policies of the local plan, of the neighbourhood plan, and it is an eyesore to its neighbours and overlooks them.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Committee, answer any questions? That's topic.
Yes, I attended the site meeting on Monday, and I walked right up to the fence that you show in one of your photographs and was looking at the blank wall to the neighbouring bungalows. I'm quite tall. I went right up to the fence. I went up on tiptoes and I couldn't see into anybody's garden from there.
Well, remember, this is an upside down house. So it's going to have a balcony on the second floor, which is taller than you. So you will be able to
Yes,
see.
but there's also quite a lot of trees there that aren't going to be removed because they're on the other side of the fence.
But they're deciduous trees, so they will be seen. They're deciduous trees, so they will be seen in the winter or in the spring.
So what my point was that I disagree with the fact that you could see into the neighbours' gardens from there.
Well, the photograph shows it. And that was from the developer's plan, not from mine. Sorry, yes, developer's plan, not mine.
Councillor Ramsay, your question.
Yeah, you made the point that the property is taller and overbearing and higher than surrounding properties. I mean, I went to the site visit as well, so I saw it for myself, but within the information pack, the building next to it, Tanglewood, is actually, in terms of elevation, is much higher than the top of the proposed building.
Well, the buildings along Woodperry Road are higher up the hill. My concern is more with the bungalows, and also you can see the backs of the houses in the high street, which can see the field and will be able to see it.
Okay, I see no further questions. So thank you for your
Right,
presentation.
thank you.
The next speakers are Andrew and Amy Butterfield. You're just Amy.
I am just Amy Butterfield. Just me.
Right. You have 5 minutes for a moment.
Thank you. Hello and good evening, councillors. Thank you for undertaking your site visit. Having now stood on site and seen the levels for yourselves, we respectfully ask you to consider one simple question. Is this the same development that was originally approved? We would say clearly it is not. The original permission was for a low-profile, single-storey dwelling designed to sit quietly within the landform and preserve openness. What is now proposed is materially different. The height increases from 3.2 metres to 7.6 metres, and the volume increases from 781 cubic metres to over 1,000 cubic metres. The introduction of a second storey and additional built form further demonstrates the differences alongside the principal living accommodation moving upstairs. Those changes matter because they alter not only the appearance of the building, but how it is experienced from surrounding land. Our family owns the adjoining land to the east, south and west, including fields used for glamping and alpaca grazing. Today, that land reads as open countryside. The approved bungalow would have remained largely recessive. By contrast, this proposal introduces an elevated dwelling with first floor activity and presence extending across a much wider area. This is not simply a private residential relationship. It changes the character and outlook experienced across neighbouring land in active recreational use. We are not arguing that the house should ever be built. That question has already been decided. This committee is being asked to decide whether a substantially taller, larger and more prominent version remains acceptable. The original permission was accepted because of restraints. This proposal moves away from that restraint. We respectfully ask members to conclude that these changes go too far and to therefore refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Well within your time. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, so thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Beales does not appear to be in our presence or online. So we go back to questions for delegates involved. Paul, I've got a question for you, which Councillor Ross talked about the neighbourhood plan. Could you just actually elaborate how it does?
I'm not sure I can elaborate too much in terms of where the parish is coming from, in terms of where they believe it conflicts with the neighbourhood plan. There is an aspect of the neighbourhood plan that refers to resisting flat roofs, of which the proposed garage does include flat roof. What I would comment on that particular point is that there is an extant permission for an entirely flat roof dwelling on the site. So in terms of flat roofs, this development significantly reduces the extent of flat roofing built forward.
Is that where your design guide? It seems to me, yes, they only read 6. That's what. Lucy, have you got any questions? Councillor Arlett.
On the previous meeting, the lady that spoke first was concerned about the metal roof covering that's being proposed and suggested that wasn't in there in a plan about of the materials.
So, through Chair, the obviously DG1 of the neighbourhood plan was the Beckley's design guide, and what it does talk about the use of vernacular materials such as limestone, rubble, quoins, mouldy brickwork, wooden lintels, and roof pitches which should be tiled with slate or thatch. That particular criteria relates to design principles which apply to sites within the conservation area, which this is not.
Thank you. Nice, thank you. I'm sorry, that's stepping.
Yeah, one more before, it relates back to the conversation I had with the lady from the parish council. I'm looking at the plans of the new building. Am I right in assuming that the new building had south elevation, which is pointing towards the bungalows, is largely a blank frontage?
So the north elevation.
No, the south elevation.
The south elevation looks to open field. The north elevation is what looks towards the bungalows.
Okay.
And it is that one on the right hand side, top right hand corner, which does include the.
So it does include that
Yeah.
one. Okay, fine.
James, sorry, that's another.
I turn it round. Paul, you just said that it's the design guide for the parish itself does not apply because it's not within the conservation area. It is, however, in the Greenbelt. Which design guides are applicable to it, and do they allow a metal roof?
So so as part of the neighbourhood plan, they have a policy that refers to the Beckley design guide, and in there is a section about materials that are with principles which should be included on development within conservation areas, and that talks about resisting or development that should have pitched roofs and tiled roofs, but that relates to the conservation area. We have a broader district-wide design guide, which is a guide which doesn't resist contemporary design or materials. It is a case of looking at that on a case-by-case basis. If you were to look along Woodbury Road, where there are more modern structures, I suspect you could probably find a variety of materials that could arguably not be traditional or vernacular or Beckley. But that is part of the character of the area.
Okay, so the wider design code doesn't specify anything different about Greenbelt.
So no, so in the design guide it talks about all kinds of developments across the district. The Greenbelt isn't a designation in terms of its visual attractiveness or appearance. That's more to do with built form and bulk and mass.
Okay, if there's no further questions, I'm looking for a proposal. Someone to make a. That's right.
Well, as I was the one that called the site visit chairman, it was a long way to go, wasn't it?
Just one headley.
Not if you live in Wheatley.
Oh, it's yeah, I think that definitely opened our eyes on having a site visit. So that was well worth going. I personally, I don't have a problem with this, although it is higher, which we will accept that. The footprint is less than the original one. The footprint of the original one, was 242 square meters, where this one's 201. So, you know, the footprint is smaller, but it is a bit higher. The overlooking, as we saw, you know, you're overlooking the gable of the bungalow, the other properties way down the road. You know, you'd be lucky to look in anybody's back garden. That would be my opinion. I think it fits in there. I was amazed at the height. I think we all were. As you went in the entrance, you saw this great big bank in front of it. I was amazed how high that was, and that was one of the reasons I asked for the site visit. So I believe that it will sit fine in that on that site. I don't have the point which obviously the speakers have. So I propose officer's recommendation.
Thank you.
To approve.
That's seconded. Yes, thank you, councillor. Mr. Speak.
Yes, happy to speak now. So yes, I was also present at the site visit on Monday afternoon, and what struck me when we were on the site was just how high that bank is and the extent to which the building will nestle largely under the height of that bank. So it will be largely tucked away. There will be some degree of overlooking onto the house down the hill, but that will be sideways overlooking that I think can be easily overcome with landscaping. So I didn't think that the degree of overlooking was severe enough to warrant refusal.
Thank you. Okay, we open the debate. Strickland.
I was also on the site visit, and I can appreciate how this building is set down. Now, I do have some concerns over this north elevation, which is on the first floor. The first floor has this huge, great window overlooking the bungalows and the village of Beckley. Not only will it be overlooking, but it'll be presumably as a first floor house, be shining like a lighthouse over the village of Beckley in the night time. And I was bothered that the south elevation and north elevation was swapped around, so that Beckley saw the much more of a blank wall, as with the bungalows, rather than this large picture window. Anyway, that's just a view.
Yeah. Any further debate? Stopping.
Yeah, I was also there. What struck me was more how high Tanglewood is compared to this building. Tanglewood will have fantastic long views. And my belief is that this is so much lower than Tanglewood that its views will not be significant at all. And I would be very surprised if even from the first floor, which obviously we didn't have the chance to stand on because the building doesn't exist yet. But it would amaze me if, with the angles and the height of a person standing on that balcony, that they could have any direct view into the gardens to the rear of those bungalows. So I don't get that. If anybody's going to be looking down on this property, it's going to be the owners of Tanglewood, who are much, much higher. And I just don't see that this building is going to cause any significant problems once it's built and landscaped.
Thank you, Councillor Topping. I see no one wishing to speak. Back to Councillor Arlott.
Yes, Jim, the only thing that did concern me was obviously the metal roof, actually, but that's obviously been answered by the officer. Yeah, I was never a fan of contemporary, but I've grown to kind of like them over the last few years when you see them completed, and they are different. And I remember years and years ago, I was on the planning committee, and basically what they were saying, you can build the same old bog standard houses, you know, all the way through. But at least on items like this, they take you to a different period, you know, rather than all the houses being the same. So I quite got to like something just down the road from where I am. There's a square building, which actually I've kind of got to like now. I didn't like when it was first built. So Yeah, I just said so. I propose officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you, councillor Arnold. So we have a proposal for officer's recommendation. Proposed and seconded, all those in favour? No, against? Okay. Right, so that is approved. Move on to item 9 on our agenda. Which is number 8, resolution. Oh, yeah, move.
Thank you, Chair. This application has been referred to committee at the development manager's discretion. This is a permission in principle application, also known as a PIP, for a scheme of between 4 to 7 self-built dwellings. As a reminder for members, the permission in principle consent is an alternative way of obtaining planning permission for housing-led development, which separates the consideration of matters of principle for proposed development from the technical detail of the development. Permission in principle route has 2 stages. First stage, or permission in principle stage, establishes whether a site is suitable in principle. Second stage, known as the technical details consent stage, is when the detailed development proposals are assessed. That is why the only plan you have before you is a location plan defining the site area. The scope of the permission in principle is limited to location, land use, and amount of development. As members will see from the report, this site has a history attached to it of historical and recent refusals associated with housing development. The most recent application, like this one, was for a PIP. It was refused for 3 reasons. The first 2 were intrinsically linked. First relating to the principle and the second to flooding. The third related to archaeology. That application was for a slightly larger area and larger number of units. It was the subject of an appeal, but the appeal was withdrawn prior to the inspector issuing a decision. Since the previous decision by the council, there have been some important and significant changes to the planning practice guidance, PPG, when it comes to flooding. The previous PIP was refused because it was considered that there was insufficient information relating to flooding and the necessary sequential test was not submitted. The flooding issue meant that the tilted planning balance wasn't engaged, and therefore, because the site is outside of the settlement, it was unacceptable in housing policy terms too. However, in September of last year, following the council's decision to refuse, the PPG changed to the extent that the need for a sequential test would not apply for all types of flooding any longer, provided that an acceptable site-specific flood risk assessment is submitted. In this case, the case before you this evening, a site-specific flood risk assessment has been submitted. It has been very carefully considered by your drainage engineers. They are satisfied that what has been provided shows that it could be possible for an adequate solution to be brought forward at the technical details stage that deals with the issue of flooding on this site. Previous flooding reason for refusal then falls away. Given that the in-principle objection in terms of housing policy was predicated on the flooding reason, that issue is also affected by the change to the PPG. However, whilst the neighbourhood plan has been reviewed since the last application, the key difference between this application and the last is that it proposes self-build housing. There was a shortfall in both housing overall and self-build, and the combination of the two provides significant weight in the planning balance. The self-build nature of the development can be secured by legal obligation at the point of granting the technical detailed consent, thereby achieving full permission at that time. The remaining outstanding issue relates to archaeology. The applicant has provided a number of appeal examples where inspectors have concluded that this matter should be considered at the technical details stage. Therefore, in isolation, this is not, in your officer's view, a strong enough reason to refuse this application. It is important to emphasise that there is no full permission until both stages have been approved. This application relates purely as to whether the principle of 4 to 7 units on this site is acceptable. Beyond that, all other matters will need to be considered, need to be the subject of another application, which will be consulted on and considered carefully. In summary, the changes to the PPG nationally and the fact that this scheme provides needed housing for the district and self-building housing, such that the benefits outweigh the harm. The application is therefore recommended for approval.
Thank you, Paul. Not that we've had a permission in principle application before. So I can't understand what it says. It's a difficult one to grasp your head around. Yeah, okay. Number of speakers, and Pritchard. Well,
Good evening.
3 minutes, 5 minutes, sorry, when you start speaking.
Thank you. I'm speaking on behalf of Childgrove Parish Council, which strongly objects to this application. This site was assessed in depth during the preparation of the Childgrove Neighbourhood Development Plan and rejected as unsuitable, primarily because of flood risk, together with the concerns about ecology, pedestrian access, and its location outside the built-up area of the village. The application states that this is in. However, the Childgrove Brook is the southern boundary of the village. The site is outside the settlement boundary, also the built-up area, defined by South Oxfordshire Local Plan and Childgrove NVP. The land in question was a meadow used for grazing, including goats and horses, but although recently cleared by the applicants, had no recent maintenance. Churchview Cottage to the south of the site is a converted farm building and cannot be said to bookend the site. The site is unconstrained to the west, since the removal of a mature row of trees prior to the application being submitted. Childgrove Brook is part of a rare chalk stream system, only 200 in the world, which must be protected at all costs. A buffer zone of a minimum of 10 metres is essential. Sewage and other runoff pollutants must not be allowed to enter the stream. Drainage is reserved for the technical detail stage, but it is absolutely critical. Who will be taking riparian responsibility for the Childgrove Brook? Who will maintain any suds or underground swales in perpetuity to ensure no additional risk to properties to the north of the brook, which already flood when the brook breaks its banks? We have already had 6 1-in-100-year floods in Childgrove in the last 15 years. Parish Council is concerned that development here will increase flood risk to existing residents here and downstream. The report places significant weight on the provision of self-built housing. Parish Council supports this where it is located appropriately. We are currently working with SODC to facilitate 2 self-built homes on the High Street. There is therefore no need to approve development on a constrained and unsuitable site in order to support self-build. There is no requirement for additional housing in Childgrove because, as members will be aware, the village has already delivered just under 500 new homes, a nearly 50% increase, far more than we were allocated in your own local plan. Lack of infrastructure was discussed at the recent Gladman appeal. Our surgery is now extremely stressed and school places are constrained, with any availability being taken up by the impending Gladman development of 160 homes. The planning officer acknowledges that the proposal conflicts with the development plan and is outside the settlement boundary, but recommends approval primarily because of the district's housing and land supply position and the claimed self-build benefits. The committee therefore has a clear choice as to whether those benefits generally outweigh the acknowledged conflict with the adopted development plan and the site's environmental constraints and additional flood risk. The site is on a narrow, partially blind bend with no pavement, which is the main route used by residents travelling by car to the south of Childgrove and by local farm tractors. The bridge across the brook is too narrow to allow 2 cars to pass safely. We would urge committee and officers to visit the site in person to understand the safety concerns for pedestrian and cycle access to the site, and also understand that this site slopes downwards to Childgrove Brook, and any hard surfaces will increase runoff into the waterways and increase flood risk. Finally, this committee should give substantial weight to the Childgrove NDP. Local residents engaged extensively in the progress to identify suitable sites. This site was one of those rejected as unsuitable. Approving this application would yet again undermine the confidence in the plan-led system and the work of the local community. And calling to the question the value of working with SODC on our neighbourhood plan, only have it to overridden by SODC. For these reasons, Chalgrove Parish respectfully asks members to refuse this application and uphold the local plan and the NDP. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pritchard. Right, members, have got any questions? Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, I'm sure if you can't answer this question, David Turner will do. But the number in here is quite interesting. When you look at the plan which I have in front of me, on the right hand side it goes 2, 4, 6, 8. It misses out a number, and then you come to number 18, which I would imagine is what you consider is outside the built-up area. Could you tell me what happened to 10, 12, 14, and 16?
I have no idea.
What no?
Presentation. Right. Now, 3 names. Stuart Christie, Paul Bood, Paul Chisnall. Objectors.
Yeah. So I believe we have 5 minutes for all 3 of us. Is that
5
correct?
minutes between you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, do you want to come up here anyway?
You can't sit the table. You can't sit.
No. But you can do part of it as well. I'll be quick. I'll tone down my 5 minutes. I've already edited the lot of it. Okay. And I will just put those there because they show what happens.
Am I allowed to take this chair?
Please.
Matthew,
All right, yeah. Oh, yeah. Add them in.
I'm terribly sorry, we're not allowed. The chair will take those.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no problem
Thank
at all.
you. I'll take this one. Thank
No,
you.
no, I'm not taking it.
Oh, you're not? Okay.
Sorry. Chair. There you go.
Okay, thank you.
Sit down. You guys sit down. I will go as quick as I can. Okay, I'm speaking today as a member of the Chalgrove Flood Alleviation Group who work tirelessly in challenging and sometimes dangerous conditions to try and keep the Chalgrove Brook clear and allow the water to flow quickly through the village rather than back up and flood it. Unfortunately, we don't always succeed and the village has flooded multiple times as we are vulnerable to sudden increases in water levels that no amount of clearing can offset. The flood risk assessment is simply incorrect and seeks to mislead the council. The Chalgrove Brook is not a mill-leat. It is a main river as defined by both the EA and DEFRA. Their argument is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the structure and hydrodynamics of the Chalgrove Brook. A mill-leat is an artificial watercourse that conveys water to a mill wheel. The Chalgrove Brook is not an artificial watercourse. There is still one water mill on the brook, but this was constructed over the main river. It has a mill-leat, but it's at the other end of the village and bears no relation to this site. The main brook does not have a fixed intake capacity, and it regularly bursts its banks during periods of heavy rainfall, causing extensive flooding. The FRA also refers to excess water being spilled into the High Street Brook and ignores the fact that when this happens, the High Street and roads off also flood. Whilst it's true that the application site will not be affected, this is only because the site slopes upwards from the river so that the houses to the north of the river will flood instead. What the site will do is add to the volume of water reaching the brook in the first place by adding hard surfaces to a meadow. NPPF Para 170 states clearly that development must not increase flood risk elsewhere. This does exactly that. There was a material consideration. 713 in your own report refers to the PPG and uses the words without increasing flood risk elsewhere, but this is exactly what will happen, and a sequential test is clearly indicated by the increased risk. The applicant stated there's no surface water risk to the site due to new drains, but the latest surface water map shows clearly that the road outside the site is still subject to surface water flooding. The drains highlighted will simply drain this excess water directly into the Chalgrove Brook. The houses to the north of the river flood now. There is insufficient drainage for the converted farm building at 18 Berwick Road now. Above ground swales would have to be installed prior to any building and maintained in perpetuity. Who's going to do that? The FRA shows the extent of fluvial flood risk now, and it's a given that any mitigation will have to be maintained in order to remain effective. Are self-build owners going to be able to maintain these structures? Is the developer going to fund maintenance in perpetuity? I support appropriate housing in the right place, but this is in the wrong place and will increase the risk of flooding to existing residents. The majority of the houses to the north of the river are bungalows, so any form of flooding will be devastating. I'd ask the committee therefore to reject this site as unsuitable for development, primarily due to the fact that it will inevitably increase flood risk elsewhere, which is against NPPF Para 170, PPG Para 27, and the SODC Local Plan Policy EP4 Part 3. Thank you. Over to you guys.
Do we just carry on? Or? Okay. Do you want to? I think I can reiterate what's said there. I think I was partly bemused by the report from the planning officer, who made comments that why the application is not acceptable, not an infill outside a village boundary, not within the village plan, not previously developed land, and then finds a very narrow reason for giving it approval. And there are all reasons why the PIP should be rejected. By recommending that it goes forward, I think it would also allow further development, because all of a sudden that site no longer becomes infilled and it gives applicants the opportunity to build further housing. But again, Para 7.13 was mentioned. There is an impact on nearby properties. This is even stated in the applicant's original submission, in that there will be runoff, but the mitigation is that it will be to a meadow to the north. There is no meadow to the north. To the north of this development are the houses in Berwick Road, Franklin Close, and Willow Mead. And, you know, it's rather surprising that we seem to have this as part of the conclusion. And also the Highways Agency raised an objection based upon the grounds of the walking and cycling access on this particular property, which the planning officer has chose to go against and said that doesn't matter in this instance because it's easy to walk into the centre of the village. Both of these are part of the location under consideration and should be considered at this stage as part of the PIP. You can't ignore the impact on other land. You can just as fact that this is happening on one specific location.
That's your time. Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, Stuart. Am I able to hand in this as for consideration?
There should be handing in. Can I just say that the photographs I've just given you, if you look at them, it shows you the brook overflowing onto the proposed site. So it's acting as a floodplain.
Okay.
The other ones are.
We need to move forward. We can ask you a question.
Okay. Any questions associated with this thing?
I don't see any. So, yes. Councillor Sandra.
Can I just ask you about the flooding?
Yeah.
So could you just describe what happened there then?
The brook comes up and it overflows into the proposed development site. The water itself, because the water table in that area is very high, comes up through our grass, and as you can see from the photos, the back garden is totally flooded. So consequently, at 12 o'clock at night, at my age and at Paul's age, we're having to get out there with pumps to pump the water out of the garden somehow. Our neighbour, who unfortunately is on holiday this week, is in the same situation. And all the houses around there are in the same situation. With the extra housing that's being built in Chalgrove at the moment, it's putting an input onto more water into the brook because everybody discharges it into the brook. There's 160 more houses to be built our end of the village, and consequently, that's even more water for us. So we'll be drowned. So I take it South Oxford District Council is going to take on the flooding insurance for us. You know, it's just hopeless. So I don't know if you want to say this.
Maybe to Paul.
Which Paul?
Paul Boone. Sure. So can I just ask, Have you got any records of the frequency of these kind of flood events that are happening on?
Yeah, we can provide those, as Councillor Pritchard said. We've had 6 floods in the last 15 years that count as 100-year floods. That's when the high street is underwater, and the high street is underwater because when the Chalgrove Brook rises and goes through these guys' houses, it also overspills into the High Street Brook and backs up all the way down the High Street. So my house hasn't actually flooded yet, but it's got really close. But a lot of houses along the High Street have flooded. Most of them will not even speak to their insurance companies now because they're afraid if they make another claim, then they won't get insurance at all.
I can actually back that off.
Yeah. And groundwater, and the other problem is, of course, the groundwater levels rise. There is a house in the centre of the village, which is one of the really old houses, where in the winter the water is now coming up into the dining room through the floor because of the height of the water table.
Okay, can I just say something about self-build? I've done self-build. I've built my own house in the past. And basically, when the money runs out, you start cutting corners. And on a site like that, you just can't cut corners if you are going to develop it. So it's got to be very, very closely thought of.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, Edward, one more question.
In the report, I don't see any ecology report. I don't know if I missed it, but I searched through twice just now.
I think that's.
Do you- well,
these.
Perhaps you could just answer, do you happen to know if there are any ecological surveys, plant species surveys, or anything like that?
The survey for the last application, which actually had one in it, took place after the applicant had cleared the site. So most of the site was taken back to grassland. There is a tree with a TPO on it, which is a black poplar. Black poplars live in areas of very, very damp soil, and it's on the application site.
Is it, that's a native black poplar?
It's a native black poplar, one of the very rare ones.
Okay, and can you just describe what was removed prior to the first application?
Everything.
Yeah, pretty much everything. There was a row of conifers, mature conifers, that was taken out, which opens the site to the west to the field behind number 18. And there were mature willows that were taken out alongside the road.
You wonder what he was hiding, actually.
But
Was
you
he
don't-
hiding things like Japanese knotweed?
So far as you know, there's no plant species surveys.
As far as I'm aware, the last plant species survey, as I say, was done for a different application on this site for 9 houses. And it was done after the site was cleared, fairly quickly after the site was cleared. So
What do you mean by cleared?
the applicant basically cut down an awful lot of trees and cut down most of the grassland and the hedges,
Hedging.
took all the hedges
All the
out.
birds had to go.
Refenced
All
it.
the hedging went.
So if you look at the map now, it's got a fence along the side, but it used to have hedges.
Thank you.
Councillor Lott.
Very, very quick question. When was the clearance undertaken? please?
November 23, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
November 23.
So the images I'm seeing on the internet from June 23 showing quite a sylvan scene,
Yeah.
no longer resembles.
No,
no,
most
no,
of
no,
those trees have gone.
Thank you.
And-
Thank
and the
you.
road
They've got-
conifers.
it's one of the
Thank you,
issues.
gentlemen. Thank you, we need to move on.
Right, so
Thank you.
thank you, yes.
Councillor Turner.
Yeah. Right.
Good evening, members. In 29 years that I've been a district councillor, this is the first time I have been at a planning in principle meeting. It is clearly gently processed to overcome planning objections. I think it's a retrograde step. The major local objection, as you've heard, is fluvial flooding of homes and gardens in Willowmead and Franklin Close. The site is in flood zone 1, but the Chalgrove River, as defined by the EA, and gardens mentioned are in flood zone 3. It is a fact that in times of heavy rain, the gardens of 6 and 3 Willowmead suffer from fluvial flooding, as does the property in Franklin Road. If you build on the site, then more water will naturally shed downhill to the river, causing fluvial flooding affecting at least 3 properties. And reducing the property numbers from 7 or 9 to 4 or 7 really won't make any difference to us. Flooding is a major problem in Chalgrove, and we've had in the past many houses flooded. And we've had several once in 100-year floods in the last 18 years. So it's beyond belief that this wouldn't make things worse. It would be illogical to believe that. I note that 711 in the report talks about other sites should be considered when there's lower risk of flooding. Local amenities, such as the primary school, which is full, and the surgery, have not financially benefited from the excessive developments in recent years. They are both stressed. Chalgrove are already in discussions on a self-built site within the village, so I don't think this is an issue. That will be for 2 properties, I understand. The site is not in the current local Chalgrove neighbourhood development plan. Neither is it in the SODC Local Plan 2035. The access to the site is along a narrow country road with no pavement and would not be safe access development in my opinion. Reference to a 5-year land supply did not recently come up in an appeal by a developer for a development on a site in Goring, which was the appeal was rejected. It is not the fault of SODC not to be able to count already allocated sites, because the developer hasn't put a spade in the ground. That's not SODC's fault. Chalgrove has had substantial housing development in the last few years, already growing the numbers of properties by 35%. Another 160 homes have just been given planning permission, and there are proposals for another 70 homes in different parts of the village. When these are all added together, the number of homes in Chalgrove will represent a 56% growth in probably the last 7 to 8 years. Quite clearly, Chalgrove has taken more than its fair share. Please reject this proposal. It's an unsuitable site outside the Chalgrove boundary and in open countryside, and will undoubtedly cause more fluvial problems for the properties which already suffer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Any questions for Councillor Turner? I see none, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, we'll go back to all hours for questions.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for your report, Paul. One thing that struck me when I was reading the report, and in fact in your summary just earlier on this evening, was the focus on flooding as the primary objection, the primary material reason for objecting to this, and the fact that that has now fallen away. But when I was reading through the previous decisions by this council on the previous applications on this site, reference was made to landscape, to the fact that this was outside of the settlement boundary of Chalgrove, in the open countryside. So what strikes me when I'm reading your report is that there is almost no reference to landscape or to the fact that this is in the open countryside outside the settlement boundary of Chalgrove. That concern has not fallen away, has it? That remains in the planning balance.
So when we determined the previous mission principle, we were at a flat planning balance because the paragraph 11D, which engages the total planning balance, talks about areas where development should be restricted, which include the areas set to flooding. So that meant that the balance was flat. Neighbourhood plan policy kicked in terms of it doesn't have a black line, but it does talk about what they consider to be in and what they consider to be out. And I think we were all agreed that it was outside the settlement, and therefore there was extension into the open countryside and onto the settlement of the village. But that our ability to have that flat balance was on the basis of the guidance or policy that was in place in relation to flooding at that time. What changed after that, September, once we made that decision, was that the requirement for an applicant to provide a sequential test, i.e. look at other sites first before we looked at this one, that went away. That was removed. We could no longer use that as a means to resist the development, which then meant the balance was then tipped. The presumption in favour of sending development then comes into play. So yes, the development is contrary to the neighbourhood plan, and that's accepted in the report. In the final balance of things, it provides housing and self-built housing in a sustainable location adjacent to the built form of the village.
Chair, can I ask a quick follow-up question? Of course, you make reference to paragraph 14, and the specific purpose of paragraph 14 is to protect made neighbourhood plans, isn't it? So when it comes to us weighing these, the benefits and the harms of this scheme, paragraph 14 is a strong material consideration when it comes to that balance, isn't it?
It is, but there are a number of factors to include in that, which includes the self-build.
Yeah. And it's for us as decision makers to weigh those benefits and disbenefits.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, my big concern with this proposal is flooding risk. And I live in Wheatley where we've got major flooding. We've got a tiny little brook, looks like causing no problems at all. And this concept of 100-year events, again, in the last 8 years we've had 2 events. If people work on the assumption of those events, then any modelling is flawed. What confidence do you have in the tests and the report that you've seen that work that might be proposed would dramatically reduce the risk of flooding on that site?
So historically, we have resisted development on site in relation to flooding. And so we are keenly aware, as are your drainage engineers, specialists in this area. I'm not a specialist in this area. I rely on their expertise. And who have experience of looking at this particular issue throughout Chadwell and the rest of the district. What we have to remember with this type of application is that it is high level. They have to submit a flood risk assessment that has been looked at very, and I can't stress enough how carefully our drainage engineers have looked at that and concluded on in terms of what we can consider, the level that we can go into at this stage. They have concluded that what this submitted suggests that there could very well be a way forward at the technical detail stage. So we have, in essence, a second bite of the cherry. It is not an automatic given that technical details consent is granted. They will be required to submit detailed flooding information.
But I would make the point of residents of when you live in a flood area, you become a bit of an expert on flooding. They've looked at that report and believe there are significant flaws in it. And I'm willing to, I'm willing to, accept that potentially introduces a big risk of flooding. Sorry.
Sorry. Which one of you? Councillor Draganati.
Oh, I agree. Have they done any infiltration tests for the surface water drainage for this site?
I couldn't tell you.
So how would the surface water drainage from this development be handled?
I don't know. But the point is that would come as part of the technical consent application that we would consider that particular point very.
Right. So it's potentially if it failed, if the surface water drainage plan with infiltration tests failed, then this development could not go ahead even despite us giving it in principle. And one further question to follow up that. What's the the surface geology here, is it clay? Or is it gravel? Sand. Clay. Fine. I learned a friend tells me. So, okay, thank you very much.
Can I just refer back to the reasons given for refusal of the last application just nine months ago in September? Were you the officer for that?
I was.
Yeah. So the earlier one, there was a string of refusals, and it does appear to me that some of those have not been satisfactorily answered, but I don't know that we need to go to those. The first one that you gave says that in this case the site is not an allocated site in the Child neighbourhood plan, not infill, not redevelopment. The development would extend the village into the countryside and result in a harmful impact on the landscape setting of the village. The proposal is unacceptable in principle and then contrary to these policies. Those haven't gone away. None of that has gone away, has it? What's changed? I accept there were three reasons given.
Yes.
One has, according to your reports, has gone away, although we've heard evidence from people who live there that they don't think that those reports are accurate in terms of flood risk. The third one we haven't touched on, to do with known and previously unrecorded heritage assets, but I expect that you would say that can be dealt with at the full planning application. But this first one is the same as it was when that was given as one of your reasons for refusal 9 months ago. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And what's changed in your view is the balance.
What's changed is our ability to look at it in relation to the development plan, the neighbourhood plan, which had full weight at that time, because flooding was an issue. The first reason for refusal related to going beyond the built limits, harmful to the setting of the village, etc., was predicated on the second reason for refusal, the flooding. Flooding enabled us to look at that application in the flat context, the flat balance, where everything was proportioned correctly.
The first reason doesn't mention flooding.
The first reason doesn't, but our ability to use it was predicated on the flooding issue. So if flooding wasn't an issue, then the tilted balance would have been engaged at that point in time. But because flooding was an issue at that point,
yeah,
the tilted balance was flat.
So I'm accepting there's a tilted balance, but nonetheless that number one still applies as a material reason for refusal on its own.
It's an issue in and of itself.
It's as a standalone issue, depending on the weighting that we give it. It is in conflict with the neighbourhood plan, with the development plan, and so on and so on. Extends the village into the countryside, harmful impact on the landscape. So that is a material consideration.
It is. It's whether it's the balancing expert. It's a high bar.
And this is the difficulty, is that in all these exercises we're weighting different kinds of things, not even apples and oranges, but benefit of new housing with harm to the environment or harm to the landscape and so on. And this is a subjective exercise. Sorry, that wasn't really a question.
I think that's all. Everything runs around flooding, doesn't it? You say that there is a flood assessment. So the local authority villages considered the new flooding information. Where's that come from? Flooding information.
So that has been produced by the applicant in support of their application.
Would you say that then is a robust, site-specific flood risk assessment?
That is why our drainage engineers think for the level of application that we're looking at this high in principle level, they have considered that what they've submitted is enough. It's enough to pass this first stage.
That's the first stage. But they'll make a much more robust one down the line. Right. Yeah, okay. Is there any further question?
Could I particularly come back on a point that Councillor Norman raised in relation to the raft of reasons for refusal that were referred to at the start of the report? Those reasons for refusal related to outline planning application where we could consider a lot more than we could as part of this permission consideration.
I see. So that we then not allowed to draw those in now because they are
Those would all
only
become-
popped up because it was an outcome.
Those would all become issues again at the technical detail stage. The applicant will have to address.
And did you have just one other question? The Chalgrove Brook is a chalk stream, I believe. So we were told by the parish council. Does that not have special protections? Which building near it would undermine or threaten?
I'm not aware of whether the chalk stream itself afforded protections. There is a requirement to, the reason that the site area has been reduced from where it was is that one of the reasons that it failed previously was that it was that the likelihood was that there were going to be houses on their gardens within a 10-metre buffer zone of the brook, which was an issue.
Okay, right. I see any other questions.
Just one last question. I know we considered applications in principle before this committee. I can't remember. Could you remember any instances where application in principle has been approved and it's been subsequently then the subsequent detailed outline planning application has been refused, or does it?
In my experience, and I'm dealing with a lot of condition principles applications at the moment, I've yet to deal with the technical details of applications. What can happen is that then, if they get a permission principle application, they then may come forward with an entirely full planning application, which is their choice afterwards. But yes, I've yet to deal with one. But is it possible that we can refuse a technical details application? Absolutely.
Okay. Right, so I think we've talked it out enough. I'm going to look for a proposal. That's the topic.
I propose refusal on the basis that the MPPF, as far as I understand, says that the paragraph 14 to apply adverse factors must significantly outweigh the benefits. I can't see any benefits to this, and I can see a huge number of disbenefits, adverse factors. Not least, it's not a brownfield site. That's accepted by officers. It's not in the settlement boundary. It's not infill. There's already a significant flooding problem associated with the roads that immediately adjoin this field. I cannot imagine that this will do anything other than make those matters worse. And I also share the view that self-builders with very limited budgets are the last people I would want to be running the swales or any other anti-flooding measures on this site. So I would ask members respectfully to vote against this one.
Okay, can I second that?
You can.
I live in, I've said already, I live in Wheatley that has similar flooding problems. I'm on the Wheatley Flood Alleviation Group. We had an incident 2 years ago, a 1 in 100-year incident. A tiny little brook contributed to the entire high street and associated roads being flooded. There were 100 houses flooded. 30 odd families were out of their houses for 2 years. It cost millions of pounds. The council and the Environment Agency have had to find £1 million for flood alleviation within Wheatley. And I really, and in terms of people and residents, I know what it's like to live in an area where there is a continual risk of flooding. You know, as soon as it starts raining, people start getting scared. And I believe that this proposal presents a far too high a increase in risk to the village of Chalgrove. I think it should be rejected. Sorry, Chalgrove. It's all right. Oh, no, that one's all right.
Right. And I'm sure that Lisa will come back in a moment on that. Does anybody else wants to speak on it? Councillor Rob.
I'm very pleased that we have a seconded proposal for refusal. I'm deeply uneasy about this proposal, not least because I think it's a Trojan horse application. And the harm to the integrity of the neighbourhood planning process would be so egregious, I think, that it would simply outweigh the benefit of a small number of new houses that would barely make a dent in our 5-year housing land supply. The government, as we know, has completely reformed the NPPF, but they have retained paragraph 14. They've been clear that, therefore, they've been clear that they want to safeguard made neighbourhood plans against speculative development. This site lies outside the settlement boundary of Chalgrove. It is not infill, it is in open countryside. I don't believe that the landscape impacts of this have been adequately assessed in the report. Looking at just simply at online, the Chalgrove Brook provides a natural settlement boundary for the village. The houses, the bungalows leading up to the Chalgrove Brook are clearly within the settlement boundary, and what is outside of the Chalgrove Brook, what is south of it, is in open countryside. The setting of that village would be egregiously impacted by having some self-built houses straggling their way along outside of that boundary. We haven't even begun to touch on the archaeological impacts, but for me, really, I'm not a flooding expert. The landscape harm and the harm to the integrity of neighbourhood planning is simply too significant, I think, for us to approve this. And so, yeah, it's in contravention of ENB1, DES1, DES2, Policy C1 of the Chalgrove Neighbourhood Plan. The list is endless. I think, and also what no one's mentioned is that we have just had, although there's news on that front, but this committee rejected an application for 70 houses in the parish of Kidmore End earlier this year on very similar grounds to this. And the planning inspectorate upheld that decision on the basis of paragraph 14 and the impact on the integrity of neighbourhood planning. So I think that that is a very strong material reason for us to really, I don't know, bolster our confidence in this decision and our commitment to protecting the integrity of neighbourhood plans and protecting the landscape and setting of the village of Chalgrove. So I'm happy to support the proposal for refusal.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sutton.
A lot of the technical stuff's already been covered. I did make some notes, but essentially, I'm also going to support the refusal. And it's about time we listen to residents in Chalgrove. We have done before. We tried to get well. We did refuse the one in July last year, but it came back. And we really need to listen to Chalgrove residents suffering a flooding issue. It sounds very perilous, that situation. Yeah.
Don't see any further. So I'll go back to Councillor Topping. Would you like Lisa to comment on your reasons?
The reasons are.
I think if we give the reasons, then the officers have to support those reasons. Yeah,
yeah, so I've summarised what we just discussed. It's around the conflict with the Chalgrove neighbourhood plan in respect of it not being allocated sites within the open countryside. I guess it's just to remind you as decision makers, obviously, to give weight to the benefits of the scheme and what weight you give to those benefits, and that does include new housing. And I appreciate some of the comments that you made, Councillor Rob, but it's just to remind you, obviously, part of the tilted balance of the 5-year housing land supply is for you to be clear on the weight that you are giving that. But as I understand it, it is around the conflict with the neighbourhood plan. I note what you're saying about flooding. I think what is quite important is obviously the guidance around flooding has changed very recently, which is why that second reason for refusal has, in our view, been dealt with. And bearing in mind this is a permission in principle, so the technical detail stage would deal with a much more thorough consideration of flooding aspects of whether or not you want to pursue that. I would just have to be quite cautious around that, given the very recent guidance change on that. But certainly the conflict with the neighbourhood plan, paragraph 14 of the NPPF, is certainly a consideration for me. I haven't worded a full reason for refusal, but if you're happy with my summary, we will go away and we'll do that. We can always clear that up.
If I may, Chair, Lisa, I think it's important to note that this is a small number of houses. So the number of houses is what is in my mind when I'm thinking about the benefits of the scheme as well. That's it.
Okay, give us some, I'll stop it.
Well, I think everything's been said. I would just ask everybody around the table, please, to support the motion.
Okay. So we have a motion on refusal. The grounds I think we're clear on. It's contrary to the neighbourhood plan.
Yeah.
The maintenance still. Excuse me. All those in favour of the proposal for refusal, please show. That is unanimous. Yeah, thank you. I don't need to ask more because again.
Could I just make the point that, the officer said that contrary to the neighbourhood plan, that the reason given in the previous refusal was specifically resulting in harm from the landscape setting.
Highlighted.
Thank you. I always think we should leave no stone unturned.
Keep going, please. Right.
Thank you.
Have any break? Absolutely. Give them a break. Have any break?
And it is. It's just nice. It's very
Right, well, carry on. And now we're going to Sutwell. Sutwell House, sorry, planning officers, Mark Paul.
Thank you, Chair. This application is planning permission for the creation of a new lake within the wider estate grounds of Sutwell House. This application is referred to planning committee this evening. The officer's recommendation to approve the application conflicts with the view of Pinemore Parish Council to object to the application. It is important to recognise at the officer outset that the proposal is not the same as the scheme that was previously refused and subsequently dismissed at appeal. The planning inspector's principal concern related to the introduction of a new vehicular gate access, entrance gates, stone pillars, and access road, which were considered urbanising features harmful to the rural character of the landscape. Those elements are not before us today. The objections raised by local residents and Pinemore Parish Council relate to the impact on the local water network, impacts on the Children's National Landfill, concerns over construction traffic impacting local public rights of ways, and concerns that development may open the door for future development that has previously been refused. In short, the council's landscape architect raised no objection and concludes that the proposal would not adversely adversely affect the wider landscape or the special quality of the Children's National Landscape. Officers consider that the site would retain its open, wooded, and rural character, and that the lake would not be readily visible within the public farms of choice. A significant benefit of the proposal was the enhancement of biodiversity. The council's ecology team has confirmed that the scheme aligns closely with the Oxfordshire Local Nature Recovery Strategy and would deliver meaningful habitat creation and biodiversity improvements. These ecological gains will be secured through a sexual ownership agreement and a long-term management and monitoring obligations extending over 30 years. On water and drainage matters, the council's drainage specialists have reviewed the submitted flood risk assessment and drainage strategy and raised an objection. The site lies within flood zone 1 and there is no evidence for us that the proposal would create unacceptable flood risk or drainage problems. Proposed lake is likely to require a groundwater abstraction permit from the Environment Agency, which is a separate matter to planning should not be considered at this stage. Regarding construction traffic, Oxfordshire County Council Highways raised no objection subject to a construction traffic management plan. This condition will allow the local planning authority to control construction vehicle movements and mitigate impacts on local roads, residents, and users of public rights of way. Concerns have also been expressed that the lake could lead to future proposals for additional structures. Any future development would require its own planning application and it would be assessed independently. We should therefore focus solely on the proposal before us today. When we weigh the planning balance, the professional consultees all raise no objections subject to appropriate conditions. The proposal delivers biodiversity benefits, protects trees, does not harm residential amenity, and differs materially from the previously refused scheme. For these reasons, I believe the application complies with the relevant policies of the South Oxfordshire Local Plan and National Plan policy. I therefore recommend that planning commissioners grant this evening, subject to the completion of the Section 106 agreement with the constituents set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. A number of speakers. Caroline Bush on.
Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I live at Upway and also speak for residents whose homes are accessed via the narrow, unmade farm track from the B481, which also serves Stonehouse Farm. Our objection is that construction traffic is potentially being routed along an unsuitable access track, past 4 neighbouring homes and along 2 public footpaths, when a far safer and more suitable alternative exists entirely within the applicant's own property at Satwell House. As this application relates to a lake within the grounds of Satwell House, why is a construction traffic route being considered, not through Satwell House itself, but via a farm track leading only to Stonehouse Farm? The track is wholly unsuitable for this purpose, as it is narrow, unmade, with poor visibility at its entrance with the B481, bordered by trees, hedgerows, verges planted with daffodils and snowdrops, and is heavily used by pedestrians and dog walkers on public footpaths Highmore 19 and 20. In contrast, the entrances from the B481 into Satwell House are wider, have far better visibility displays, and are demonstrably more suitable for construction traffic. Whilst condition 9 requires a construction management plan to be provided and approved by the council before work can commence, the current wording does not explicitly restrict this access track from being used by construction traffic. We have grave concerns, therefore, that this condition is too loosely worded to provide the necessary safeguards against this. Allowing the use of this track for construction traffic would cause damage to trees, hedgerows, verges and the track, serious safety risks from pedestrian vehicle conflict, highway safety concerns due to poor visibility and significant noise and disturbance for residents. This is not a hypothesis. We have provided clear evidence in our objection letters of the harm that has resulted from the recent use of this track for construction works for the walled vegetable plot at Stonehouse Farm. Large vehicles caused clear damage to the track and trees, obstructed the full width of the track, creating danger and obstruction for pedestrians and dog walkers, and caused an unacceptable level of disruption for neighbours. This alone clearly demonstrates the track's unsuitability beyond any doubt. This damage was considered serious enough for the council's senior tree officer to require specific remedial works to the track as part of the planning process, which the applicant has chosen to ignore. Concerns were also raised by the access officer regarding the management of construction traffic on these footpaths. Crucially, there are better alternatives. The applicant controls existing suitable access points to Satwell House from the B481 that would safely accommodate construction traffic without harming residents, the environment, or the safety of footpath users. We therefore suggest that the wording of condition 9 is strengthened to address our well-founded concerns to explicitly prohibit construction traffic from using this track and require access via appropriate alternative routes within Satwell House. Without this explicit restriction, we do not believe it is possible to conclude, as the officer has done, that this development is acceptable in terms of its impact on neighbouring residential amenity, pedestrian and highway safety, and the health of trees and hedgerows. In summary, harm from construction traffic on this track is already proven. This proposal would only worsen this harm. However, a specifically worded amendment to condition 9 could prevent all of this entirely. We therefore urge members of the planning committee to take the simple and reasonable step of strengthening condition 9 in the manner that we suggest to ensure that the environment, residential amenity and highway safety are appropriately protected. I would encourage members, if possible, to visit the Stonehouse Farm access and alternative Satwell House entrances. Seeing the two options or the multiple options on the ground will clearly demonstrate the significant differences and safety features between them. Lastly, I would ask you to consider the unsuitability of this farm track for use by construction traffic in relation to this application and any other applications, either future or currently under consideration by this council at Stonehouse Farm or Satwell House. Other considerations specific to the lake itself, which have already been mentioned, is the unnecessary water burden on local aquifers when there are yearly hosepipe bans. Something that hasn't been mentioned is the use of night lighting in the dark skies area, which has been promoted by our parish council. And finally, is this lake for agricultural use or is it an ornamental lake? If it's an ornamental lake, has there been a change of use for the land from agricultural to residential? Thank you for your time and consideration.
Okay. Thank you, Caroline. Richard, have we got any questions for this couple on?
Caroline, would it be true to say that there are, am I right in thinking that there are 3 current applications currently under construction using that track?
Correct.
Thank you.
Would you mind pointing out on the plan where the track runs? So I can see the farm on my
This is the B481.
Yeah.
This is the access track. And footpath 20 runs the entire length of this track. Footpath 19 runs along here and all the way into the cricket ground.
Right.
The entrances that currently exist are obviously into Satwell House. Bearing in mind this is Satwell House and not Stonehouse Farm. There's an entrance here, which if one were able to show you, I haven't got the thing, but it's on various documents that I've already sent, entitled Alternative Construction Routes. The visual displays here are huge. The visual displays at the other entrance to Satwell House here are also huge. The visual displays, and I'm only going by Google Street View, the visual displays here are dreadful. We encountered all sorts of issues during the construction of the walled vegetable plot. It only took 3 weeks to rip up tree roots along here, for construction lorries to back into hedgerows and rip out hedges. Sorry, I'll shut up.
Thank you.
I see no further questions. So thank you very much for your presentation. Right, next one is of the engagement. Online. Okay. Sorry.
Hello, everyone. Can you are you able to hear me?
Yeah, you can see you. Yeah.
Lovely. Okay. If you're happy for me to, I'll just launch into my response. I'll take the silence as yes. Okay. Thank you, Chair and members. As mentioned, I'm Alfie Yetman. I'm a chartered town planner and the agent for this application. I appreciate the opportunity to speak briefly in support of the proposals and your officer's clear recommendation to grant permission. Just a brief overview, Satwell Estate intends to construct an element of the previous wider landscaping scheme that was dismissed at appeal in order to improve the landscaping of the estate and create a wonderful naturalistic environment. Through the previous planning application process, the lake and associated tree and soft landscaping was an entirely non-contentious element. No negative comments were received by officers, members, or the planning inspector. And in fact, the inspector commented that there is much to commend about the scheme and mentioned that the proposed landscaping design is of very high quality and in many respects would be compatible with the prevailing landscaping character of the area. I would like to, however, just take the opportunity to address those comments raised. Firstly, on construction impact, the concerns have been noted and it has already been agreed with the council that the Stonehouse Farm access track would not be used for the purposes of construction. You can see that the access track itself is not within the application's red line boundary, so it's in reality it's unlikely to be legally available to be used in relation to the development. Construction of the construction traffic will access the site via the main entrance to Satwell House via the B481. It will avoid any impact on public rights of way and it will be controlled by the conditioned construction traffic management plan. In terms of the nature of construction traffic, it's expected to be very light. There's no bulk materials to be moved in or removed from the site. In my experience, machinery would be expected to arrive at the start of construction, remain on site for the duration, and workers will arrive daily, but unlikely to exceed circa 5 to 6 workers operating the machinery for the majority of the construction. So the number of movements associated with the construction is assessed to be negligible. On the issue of water use, the water to fill the pond is provided or expected to be provided by a borehole at the site, and it's located on a highly productive chalk aquifer. Boreholes benefit from permitted development rights and do not require planning permission themselves. However, an abstraction licence will be required from the Environment Agency if there is deemed to be a need to extract more than 20 cubic metres of water per day. The EA is responsible for making sure that abstractions do not damage the environment and will not authorise abstractions during certain periods if there is a risk to groundwater dependent features. For instance, in times of a drought, the groundwater may fall and therefore there is a management arrangement with abstraction licence holders to remove or reduce the abstraction that takes place until environmental conditions improve. Just picking up on two of the smaller points, no lighting is proposed as part of the application, and that is also controlled by condition. And in respect to land use, it's been established with the council for some time that this part of the estate is parkland associated with the main house. It is not agricultural land. And the purpose of the proposal is for landscaping reasons rather than a practical agricultural application. In summary, Satwell Estate is the custodian of part of this incredible landscape and is looking to deliver a scheme that further enhances its beauty as well as ecological value. The planning application meets all the relevant policy requirements in terms of principle of development, landscape impact, impact on trees, ecology, drainage and flooding. I therefore respectfully invite members to accept your officer's professional recommendation and grant planning permission this evening. Of course, I'd be very happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yacob. Committee, any questions? Councillor Topping.
Yeah, I'm just slightly confused in terms of the construction traffic access. Alfie, are you saying that your client will not be using the Stonehouse Farm access?
Yes, yeah, that's correct.
They would only be using the main access to Satwell House.
Yeah,
is
correct.
that correct?
Yes.
So that will hopefully overcome Caroline's objection, if that's the case, or am I getting this wrong?
No, sorry, that's fine, providing it's put in the conditions.
Yeah.
Answering your questions, Mr. Yacob. Any further questions?
Yes. Yes.
Sure.
Councillor.
Thanks, Mr. Yacob. You've indicated that the client is happy for construction vehicles to be using the main entrance onto the B481, that large, paved entrance to the main house. Are you satisfied that we should have that as a condition then? I'm aware that we can't condition things outside the red line, and you referred to that. But nonetheless, I'm concerned that you referred to that because I'm wondering if therefore the use of Stonehouse Farm track could happen anyway. I mean, what assurances can we have? Can we condition that? What assurances do we have that you will actually stick to that?
Well, it will be controlled by the construction traffic management plan, which is conditioned, and that will set out a requirement for, the sole use of the main entrance onto the B481 rather than the Stonehouse Farm track. You can see on this plan that the Stonehouse Farm track is at the opposite end of a woodland tree belt. So we're obviously wanting to avoid movements through that space. The access, as mentioned, at Stonehouse Farm is a lot poorer in terms of visibility space. So it makes no practical sense to use that entrance rather than the main one to the estate, which is a lot more appropriate for vehicle movements.
Lovely, thank you.
I see no further questions, so thank you, Mr. Yacob, for your time and comments. Again. Right, where are we now? Local councillors. Mr. Street, it's a local councillor. Either of you, both of you.
I'll speak in debate.
I'm happy to speak. I have no objections to this application. I have two questions which were for the officer. Can I go to those?
We go straight to those if you're not going to speak about them.
Okay.
So, questions for the officer.
They are very straightforward ones which I had raised with you in writing. Can we condition that the CTMP says that they must not use the Stonehouse Farm track?
I would be hesitant to provide that as a part of the condition, or conditions have to be necessarily tests. It may be that the track in question could be viable. However, if that's the case, we shouldn't be conditioned saying absolutely you can't be using it. Because on planning grounds, it could be liable to use for construction traffic. However, as the agent explained, if they were to come in with the CTMP and say that they're going to go off the main road, the aspect of the condition that says thereafter the development shall not be carried out other than in accordance with the approval, CTMP, which will basically fix them to having to use the CMT, that access. I know it's not quite what the neighbour is looking to have, but I don't think legally, I don't think it meets the tests to put in there absolutely, you can't be using this access. I don't think.
So that makes it less acceptable to pass it because of this problem. We do not want that access used.
That is a perceived problem, and he said it's not a problem. Yeah. Can we condition it that the access must be within the red line?
Well, that's, yes, I mean,
It must be
we
within.
could be, but it's also the blue edge line of the site
Right.
which covers the actual full extent of that well.
Yeah, that's supposed to be within the application.
My understanding that you can conditions can relate to land that's in the blue edge line.
Yes, it's within the red line.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the concerns, and if it were a case that I could restrict it and say absolutely not, I would have. In fact, the Oxfordshire County Council Highways Department have actually considered it, and they have not in their comments suggested that it's even appropriate to use that. They want to see a construction traffic management plan because of the supposed amount of work that we proposed and they want to control vehicular movements for highway safety grounds.
I mean, they presumably there were.
What I can, sorry to interject, but what you can do is obviously you can suggest it as a condition. You can add it to condition. It's your decision this evening to do so. I'm just concerned that it opens us up to a possible appeal against that condition for not meeting the test. So
But Mark, it doesn't sound from what the applicants.
it doesn't sound that way, I know, but I appreciate that. And that's kind of the judgment you have to make this evening.
I think I would like to propose that there is a condition that they either you can say they mustn't use that one or they must use the one they are proposing to use.
They must have that.
Whichever is more likely to be.
Just must use it within the red line.
Chair, can you just
Yeah.
perhaps offer a solution? So the condition needs to be discharged at a later stage. It needs to be agreed by the county. What you could do is two things. You could amend the condition to include a requirement of the applicant to consult with neighbours as part of the design of the construction traffic management plan. So we have to speak to neighbours in the local area about what routes they're intending to use, what access they're intending to use, and provide that the outcome of that consultation process as part of their plan. So it shows that they've done some engagement. You could also include a requirement that the applicant has to have explored a range of different options for access. Because we're hearing two different sides.
I think
this
the problem
evening,
here is
and
about
that can be in the
compulsion.
plan.
It's not about what they might
But if it's
want.
within the requirements of the condition, if the plan comes in and it doesn't show that community engagement and doesn't show a range of options and reasons why that hasn't been pursued, then the condition would fail. You could also put informative on as well to supplement that to say the applicant is strongly encouraged to consider using. I think Mark is correct that if you explicitly remove an access, it wouldn't necessarily meet the test of conditions. So we are open to challenge on that, but also there may well be a conflict of information as well.
I thought it was just the kind of thing that conditions were intended for. Precisely this kind of thing to say, yes, we're happy with your application, it's all good, but we'd like you to drive in this way rather than that way.
You can in some areas can be that explicit. I think if we were to be challenged and we go to appeal, we have to be very clear as officers as to why a particular access is not acceptable.
Well, the agent has declared to us all that they intend to use this one. I just want to make sure they use it. So they're not going to challenge.
Well, then you could bolster the condition up by making it clear that they do use that, or you have an informed supplement condition. Because ultimately, it's not for us to agree it this evening because you have a condition that requires them to submit a plan, construction traffic management plan, and that will need to include details of routing and access in and out. So,
Can I just ask quickly about the construction traffic management plan when they submit it? Do we approve it or does county approve it?
We approve it through consultation with the county.
So if they come up with a construction traffic management plan that leaves open the possibility of them using a dirt track with 5 houses and a footpath running across it, or down its length, we can refuse that construction traffic management plan, can't we?
If the county council consider it to be natural.
and it doesn't meet the remit, it doesn't, it's in the interest of highway safety and the residential needs of those living nearby. If you found conflict with that,
We found
would
conflict
refuse
with
the
the word.
conditions.
My concern is that the it's true that there have been construction traffic going down the footpath as a result of multiple developments.
Yeah.
I understand the concerns of locals. It is a public right of way. It is covered in itself by its own legislation in terms of damage, protection, and restoration. I understand it's legally required should they damage it to repair it or have some sort of. But I'm trying to get. No, I'm just trying to figure it that's also a reason why it's covered by the legislation.
I remember only a month ago when we were discussing a new site for the waste vehicles for the district be parked up near Little Milton. There were conditions to think about which routes those could use to minimise impact on Little Milton. Is it not similar?
Well, it's similar. I would say the traffic management plan must be within the plan site. You're not saying where to go, it must be within the red line.
Could we leave you to we mandate that you find the best solution which ensures that the applicant does not use Stonehouse track?
I think we've an assurance from the agent. And I think the officers know the opinion of everybody else.
Chairman, the agent has said what they're going to use.
Yes.
So that in the condition, Mr. So-and-so, when he spoke to the committee, he explicitly said that they would use X.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't use Y.
Absolutely. I don't think we need to pursue it any further. The officers know
Well, yeah,
what the
in which
opinion of the
case,
committee is.
yeah.
So we just.
in which case we could amend condition 9, which relates to the plan, to say construction traffic management plan, which includes using such and such access shall be submitted to and approved by. It's very clear.
Yes.
That's it.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
As agreed.
As agreed with the, yes, I think that's better. Because we don't need consultation, residents and the parish council have already said they don't.
So moving on to my second question of 12. Can we put a condition that the applicant must apply for the abstraction license before they break ground?
No, we can't do that. It's a license, a permit aspect that's covered by separate legislation. For it to interfere with planning legislation would be inappropriate.
Okay, where are we going? Councillor Topping.
This may sound a bit frivolous, and it may be that I missed it when I read your report, Mark, but how big is this lake?
It's size-wise, volume-wise, I'm not aware. It is the deepest point is 3 meters, as shown on the
And
section.
what's the square meterage?
0.48.
Sorry,
1.048 per hectare.
So an acre.
I don't deal with old. I don't know what the actual that version I know. Yeah, no, I don't ask people to convert.
Okay, well, that's useful to know. I didn't pick that up from reading the report.
Okay. I mean, it's almost like the subsequently. Yeah. I mean,
the reason for that is that just to know what we're approving a lake of a size, because when we approve a building, generally it's of a size. And we know what we've approved, so it is an acre and a quarter or whatever.
Yeah, and I trust that this is not a regular type of application.
No, we've never got any items on one like this. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Blanchard.
Just a quick question. There is already a pond or a lake there, I noticed.
That's not in that little bit of a location, it's nearby.
It's nearby. I'll shut up.
Okay.
Right, you've been finished with questions. I'm looking for a proposal. I'm just staying down.
On there.
Councillor Norman.
I propose that we accept off as a recommendation.
Okay, that's seconded.
Can I just check that with the wording of the condition?
With the change of condition.
Yes, please.
Condition 9.
Okay. Councillor.
I'm happy to second that with the change condition.
You can speak to your proposal.
We examined this at great length when this lake was part of a larger application, and our reasons for refusal of that did not include problems to do with the lake specifically, and nor did the appeal decision later. So there are really no planning grounds for refusing this, and I'm happy to recommend approval.
Well, just to say that I agree with everything James said. I don't think there's any good reasons against it, and there could even be some good reasons for supporting it. not least biodiversity. So for that reason, I'm seconding it.
Is there any debate? Councillor Roll?
Yes, I'm aware that the inspector, this committee actually refused the previous application, which was a far broader application, including punching a massive hole in a hedge and putting a driveway right across agricultural fields. And the inspector agreed with our decision. So well done us. But what the inspector didn't have concern with was this lake. And in fact, the inspector said there was much to commend the scheme, by which I'm assuming the inspector meant in part this lake and some of the landscaping. I happen to think the lake is a monstrosity. It's far too big and it's totally out of keeping with the character of the area. But, who cares what I think? It's about the planning inspectorate. There were only 2 elements that were deemed harmful under the previous scheme, and this was not, according to the inspectorate, one of them. The impact on the groundwater, I'm concerned. It's a massive lake, but that's for the EA to decide. That's not for us to decide. And the traffic management plan, I feel, has to be absolutely watertight to protect that track that goes along to Stonehouse Farm. And I'm happy with this amendment to the condition that will tighten that up to make sure that that track must not be used. I don't love the scheme, but I don't see any reasons to refuse it at this stage. So I'll be supporting the proposal.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Roll. Any further debate? We'll go to Councillor Norman to start. Sorry.
No, sorry, that's well.
I think we should support this particular application.
Okay, I've got no vote. All those in favour of? Those for? Yeah, okay. There's no against, so actually unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay. Well, that was short.
It does show. Yes, thank you.
Yes,
This application is referred to the planning committee. The views of the Parish Council conflict with your officer's recommendation. The planning commission should be granted. The application site comprises an area of a small agricultural plot adjacent to the built confines and the settlement of the Fulton and is located within the Greenbelt. Swin proposes a single 1.5 story 3-bedroom dwelling with a detached garage. The officers consider this site to be outside of the built confines of the village. This creates conflict with the housing policy. However, with a tilted planning balance in favour of permitting sustainable development is engaged, the proposal is located immediately next to the existing properties, the edge of the village, in a sustainable location. In this case, the benefits of permitting a house here outweigh the harm created by conflict with policy. The site is on the Greenbelt, and being located outside of the settlement means that it does not qualify as one of the exemptions to building in the Greenbelt under paragraph 154 of the NPPF. However, this site does, in your officer's view, fall within the definition of Greybelt. The site does not conflict with the relevant purposes, including land within the Greenbelt, in respect of checking the unrestricted urban sprawl of large built-up areas, preventing neighbouring towns merging into one another, or preserving the setting and special character of historic towns. The proposal seeks to address an unmet need in the form of housing van supply deficit and is in a sustainable location. Therefore, the development is not inappropriate in the Greenbelt when considered against paragraph 155 of the NPPF. The development will sit comfortably in the street scene in an area of mixed design, materials, and appearance. It does not give rise to an unacceptable neighbourly impact, provides for adequate parking and visibility. The application is therefore recommended for approval.
Thank you. Right, so you have the first speaker is Chris Warwick. Chris Warwick, yeah. Right. Who's object? What's he want? As you wish, you have 5 minutes. When you start speaking.
Hi. Okay, my name's Chris Warwick. I'm a resident of Holman. The village is located about 6 miles east of Oxford. It's quite an ancient village and with a lot of history. And it had a very significant role in the English Civil War. You can see from my slide, if it ever appears, that the village is quite spread out. You might not be able to get this detail, but the village hall and the church are over here to the right, school, and playing fields over to the left. And the main concentration of housing is more towards the north. Local archaeologists are still digging up history from all over the village, and it's seen as an important environment. A local historian has told me that the location of this development, known as St Andrew's Field, is the last remaining part of the medieval deer park in this area of the village. The site of the proposed development is shown by that red dot there. It's located in the green belt, and therefore the grey belt rationale is proposed as justification. There are limited ways to oppose a grey belt determination, but one is the preservation of the setting and special character of historic towns. But how do you demonstrate a potential detrimental impact on an ancient town? Well, surely one thing you shouldn't do is build something that is not necessary. I do understand the position regarding a 5-year housing land supply, and that Oxfordshire does not have adequate land available. But taking it down to a local level for the moment, Holton does in fact have a relatively large amount of land available for housing. This is at the old Brookes University site, shown in the southeast bit of the village there. And some 450 houses are due to be built over the next 5 to 10 years on this site, which will effectively triple the size of the village. So it's evident to us that Holton will make a proportionally much higher contribution to housing and land shortfall. And therefore this leads to the conclusion that there's no demonstrable need for the development being considered this evening. So for this reason, and the consequential need for the preservation of the setting and special character of historic towns, we therefore believe that this development should not be permitted. And we thus ask for your support by refusing this application. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Rich, you have any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Rowe, is it the design of the building not being compatible with the historic village, which is your main objection?
I think it's more the fact that we believe our green spaces are valuable in the village, and that we should do everything possible we can to preserve them. You can nibble away at the spaces and eventually end up with I think that's backed up with the fact that we already have a proposal for a large number of houses in the village anyway, and therefore that should not allow a demonstrable need at the moment for this one.
Right, thank you, Mr. Rowley. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I have a supporter on my list, but I don't see anyone. Oh, there.
Hi.
I'm looking over there. Sorry.
No, my name is Angela Banks and I'm a planning consultant who's basically involved in submitting this application. I think it all speaks for itself. It is one house. It is a self-built house. It follows the line of houses along here, and 1.5 stories matches these neighbours. Across the road, double-storey houses, and they go all the way around St Andrew's Field. And down here, you've got Wheatley Park School. So it's not, strictly speaking, something that is out in the middle of the countryside. However, the agricultural field, all of this is being maintained. So the green space, the majority of it, is being maintained. And basically, I'm here if you've got any questions, really.
Is that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it speaks for itself.
Speaks for itself. Okay, committee, questions?
Yeah,
Councillor
can I just ask two questions?
Yeah.
There was an application approved in 2024 to build an agricultural building. Are there any buildings on the site now?
Yes, there's a barn here. And there's a small barn there.
And the other one, the applicant, which I find quite strange, St Andrews Residential Care Home. What does that have to do with the application?
So the site is divided between my colleague here, Stephen Longthorpe, his brothers, who also own the St Andrews Care Home. And so part of the site is owned by the care home, but it will be a self-build project. So
That's fine, thank you.
Councillor Long.
There's just a sort of slight concern raised by the rather unhappy planning history on this site, which doesn't read very well. 21, an entrance was removing a section of wall and so on. That was approved. And then from then on, nearly everything was refused, including retrospective change of use from agriculture, erection of 2 sheds, 2 storage containers, erection of a boundary fencing, and so on. All refused and appeal dismissed. Then the erection of agricultural building refused. And then an agricultural building was approved. Are they on the specific site where the house is to be built? Or are they just within the wider ownership?
the barns are within the wider ownership. There is nothing now on the specific site. The fencing that was on the wall has been removed. So everything in terms of that appeal has been rectified. And I would say that was quite complicated because it was more about the use of the land to create some more leisure use. And the idea was for the care home to be able to come with the elderly people to actually enjoy the land and do gardening and things like that. Well, that failed. But this is a small agricultural plot. And ideally, if someone can actually live on the plot, who's then looking after the plot, it's much better. But it's not going to be an agricultural tied building.
Did the applicants engage in agriculture?
You've been doing that, haven't you?
We had sheep and goats on that site now since 2013.
But the actual site itself it's not a grave, it's not I beg your pardon, I'm getting confused with grave. It's not a brownfield site.
Not a brownfield site.
It's never had buildings on the actual site.
It did have some sheds on it. That was part of the appeal and dismissal, so the sheds were removed.
I
So
understand.
at one stage, it had some sheds on it, yeah.
Thank you.
The same as the storage units. They have been moved and planning permission has been granted to allow them to stay in the barn.
Thank you, Angela. That's no further questions. Thank you for your presentation. Right, Tim Beard is not in there. So we'll go back to the Paul Ballard show. Any questions from Paul? That's a case wrong.
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the problems with what the speaker was saying is that this isn't a town. It's described as a small village, which really doesn't help his argument. But one of the things that did interest me was the reference to a heritage site. There's no indication of any heritage assessment of this site in the report, is there? Were you aware of this, or was it just provided as not relevant?
As part of the application process, the archaeologists will have been they monitor applications as they do them. And this was an application that they did not choose to comment on. So I can't comment beyond the lack of interest from the county archaeologist.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I just wondered if they knew whether you have local knowledge, which they don't. Anyway, sorry. Okay, fine, thank you. No, you're not.
Sorry, no, I can't go back to you. Any further questions? What's the moment?
Paul, the grounds for claiming that this is grey belt, that's really what distinguishes on making really. So there are 3 grounds, and this you think complies with one of them, which is to say that it does not contribute to the wider, as a phrase, doesn't contribute to the wider landscape value of the green belt.
There are 5 purposes to including land within the green belt, and when we consider whether or not it falls within the definition of grey belt, we look at 3 of those 5, and so we have to assess whether or not this development conflicts with the purpose of checking unrestricted urban sprawl of large built-up areas. I would argue this isn't a large urban area, and it talks about also to assist in safeguarding the countryside from encroachment. Whilst for policy purposes, this is looked at as being in the countryside, in reality, it's a plot of land attached to or extending the built form of the village. And the last one talks about to preserve the setting and special character of historic towns. This isn't a town. And unfortunately, field decisions are, well, that we have looked at this particular point in the belt, literally takes it on its face, looking to apply it to only towns.
So if it doesn't fulfil one of those 3 purposes, it automatically becomes grey belt. Can be argued.
Yes. It can't conflict with any of those 3, and we argue that it doesn't fit any of those 3.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I see no further questions. Therefore, I'm looking for a motion, please. I'll do myself for obviously recommendation for approval. Is that second? Thank you, Carol. Thank you. I need to speak now, don't I? I just agree with everything, Paul. I think it's a good report, Paul. And if it is mine, yes, to this issue on grey belts. I think it probably is in its definition, and therefore I support the recommendation for approval. Councillor Tom.
Well, coming from Dick, of course we like a green spaces. Of course I appreciate green spaces if you're in a village or a town, but unfortunately that doesn't appear to be a plain reason not to go ahead with Foster's recommendation.
Nobody's thinking late. Councillor Arlott.
Well, I'm sitting here and I don't know which way to go. And I've answered Paul Bowers talk through his report, and then I look at this and all I see is kind of creeping development. Do we grant this one and another 6 months another one comes along, and then another one and another one? Or do we say no, we'll stop where we are? But maybe I haven't got any reasons for refusing. But I'm just unbelievably open minded on it. If it's a good application or if it's a bad application, I'm sorry, but I don't know if it is good or bad. I really don't. So I'll listen to anybody else that can change my mind.
Councillor Top.
Yeah, just I don't have strong enough reasons to go against officers' recommendations, so I'll be supporting this one.
Councillor Roll.
Oh, no, it's all right.
Yeah, I think we're driven into a position where we have to accept the officer's recommendation through a tacky development over years, through the application, development being done without permission, retrospective applications, putting in storage containers and retrospective agricultural buildings in this tiny site. But there we are. That's I saw the civil servants in the Whitehall don't actually realise what they allow with their fine ideas of with building homes for all the people, and we actually got this sort of thing going on all the time. But there we are. It's the world we live in, and I can see no reason to refuse it.
down to me, I suppose, to sum up. I think I've got the same sort of feelings that's been expressed. I can't find a good reason to refuse it. Therefore, let's go with the officer's recommendation for approval. Okay, all those in favour? Thank you. That's universal. That's unanimous. What I'm going to say universal. Unanimous. Right, that brings us to the last item on the agenda. Just appeals. Anybody want to comment on appeals?
I did, Chair, I did have a question though. I don't think it's on this page. And that relates to the application for leave of judicial review, give more insight. Which we had one. We received we received a letter this week from the agents for the applicant on the Kidmore End site that this committee refused some months back, and which was then backed up by the planning inspector. And as I understand it from this letter, that some members have received, and I don't know, I assume the council has also received notification that the applicants on that site are applying for judicial review of the inspector's decision.
I don't think that's generally known as.
Oh,
I don't
think
so.
I mean, I haven't seen it, that's the
well, it is, but they're doing it. It's public.
That sounds like reaction protocol. They're challenging the appeal decision.
They are.
It is a reaction
For the
protocol.
inspector.
To defend it.
Yeah, quite, because it's an appeal against the inspector's decision. Or the, yeah, okay. Would this council ever become a party to that type of?
We would be an interested party. You know, it would depend on the grounds for challenge as to whether or not how involved we get. But we will be listed as an interested party.
Okay.
But it's essentially for the inspectorate to consider it. They may not defend it if they feel that actually it's not sensible, but that would then council to advise them, I'm sure.
Yeah, okay.
Unfortunately, that particular appeal is not on our list. I think everybody was surprised at the inspectors.
No,
yeah.
I was surprised. No, I felt it was a vindication of this committee, which gave really strong reasons. Actually, I wasn't surprised in the least. It was an on-balance decision, and I thought the inspectorate vindicated our decision making. So it will be interesting to see what the outcome of this leave for judicial review says.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment on the appeal decisions. And what concerns me is what's going to take place in October. And I've already written to Matthew Penny Cook or whatever his name is about this. I'm reading here, and if I'm wrong, I apologise, but the majority of these that we've lost on appeal, and we've lost 7. Obviously the Thames Farm one was a pity, but all the other ones, if I'm wrong, put them straight, but it looks like they're down to delegated decisions that were made by officers that have gone to appeal, and we've lost them all. No disrespect to the officers, but there must be a problem somewhere why we are losing so many appeals by officers refusing applications and people going to appeal rather than coming through the committee. Basically what I'm coming to, come October, we around this table ain't going to make many decisions because the officers are the ones that are going to make them. Looking at what's in front of us now, you could be in for a sorry old time if you're looking at that. But I just wondered if they'd like to comment on the amount of appeals that we've lost.
I mean, this represents a snapshot in time. I think our general.
It's not a good snapshot.
No, it's not a snapshot. Well, certainly not in black and white terms. I think it's fair to say our general appeal performance is within threshold. So obviously we're monitored by government over a 2-year rolling period. You might have seen that Chairwell have recently been designated for the quality of their decision making for large applications. There's always a risk for every council when you make a decision. And I think it's fair to say that, even officers will make a view and take a judgment. And we do the same balancing exercise where we question how successful might we be at appeal. I think the direction of travel from the inspectorate in we've seen is that they are very pro-development. The bar is really high for refusal. So, and every appeal decision, whether it's a committee overturn or delegated, is a learning exercise in and of itself. So, hopefully, we are learning from these, and where there are key messages coming out from those decisions that we are taking forward for that decision. But you're right, come October.
Far be it for me to say, but there's only reason why we keep winning the Headley appeals.
I'd like to comment on this mention about the designation. I think there are 10 authorities in the country. Nine, is it? Who has the ability to deliver on major applications taken away. Are they going to the?
Why is that?
Because they haven't performed well on appeal.
It's the qualities. It's not speed. The speed and quality are looked at, but it's nine on quality.
No, it's nine on quality, including Cheryl. So their ability to adjudicate or deliver on major applications.
This is just one of a toolbox of ways the government is going to grab at.
Oh, yeah.
On the planning system. Yeah. It doesn't really matter which. I mean, they're going to use all the tools in the box, aren't they, to remove planning from democratic oversight.
Yeah.
It's just one tool.
It seems that the Kidmore and the golf course decision by the inspector wasn't, but sort of actual bit of a maverick decision. Does the planning inspector have any sort of review process within it, or are these inspectors completely on their own?
So for the majority of written reps and hearing decision, they are not reviewed. They are decided by the inspector and issued by the inspector. Public inquiries do go through more of a rigorous review because clearly they are generally more controversial in and of themselves and are more likely to be challenged through judicial review. But usually inspectors have the free rein to determine their appeals. You might see on some decisions they work with other inspectors, so there'll be an officer that does the site visit and does all the fact-finding things, and then there's an inspector that writes the decision. So they do sometimes work in teams, but yeah, generally, by and large, they are issued just of their own. Now, whether or not there's an internal performance review, a bit like reporting, I'm sure there's statistics and things like that. They report on how many they're allowing, how many they're refusing, but whether they go into kind of deep.
Yes, in this case, obviously, the applicant Fairfax decided that they have lots of money so they can do this judicial review and get legal opinion, but that's because the decision went against them. When it gets us, we don't have those lots of money to counteract maverick inspectors.
Right.
It's get a social chairman to continue.
Continue the debate. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you all next.